Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Lamed Gimel of Ketubot, and we are in the bottom line of Lamed Bet Amud Bet. And let's back up and talk about where we are so that we can, rather than just try to jump in.
Or different lady.
Well, we're always talking about ladies and men, but yes, right now we're talking about same lady as we were talking about yesterday. And what we're discussing is that there was a conflict between our Mishnah and a Mishnah in Maseches Makot. That our Mishnah said a particular man who did a bad thing, who violated a young girl, it was going to have to pay a fine, and the Mishnah in Makot, in a different tractate of the Talmud, so it said that the person who did so would get malchus, that they would get lashes. And so the question is, why is there this difference? So Ula offered one answer, and Rabbi Yochanan offered a second answer. And we will actually hopefully get at the end of today to a third answer. But let's go through the two answers that we've heard so far. So Ula answered this question by saying, our Mishnah is talking about a na'ara. A na'ara is the only one who is subject to this law of having to pay the fine. Once you get beyond a na'ara, once you're a bogeret, so then you're not subject to this law. So as subject to the fine. And so as a result, this Mishnah, our Mishnah, is talking about a na'ara who is subject to the fine, and the Mishnah in Makot is talking about a bogeret. So, so as a result, in that situation, because there's no fine, there's lashes. But the bottom line is, according to Ula, you don't get both lashes and the fine. And he learned that based on a pasuk. We went back and forth as to what it was based on, but in the end, it ended up being based on a pasuk, tachas asher ina, based on the fact that it says tachas in connection with the person who violated the girl, and that she's going to get paid in lieu of the afflicting of her. And we also have another very famous verse that says ayin tachas ayin, that an eye for an eye. And so just as an eye for an eye, even though one technically could be subject to lashes because you've violated a prohibition, you're not allowed to hit somebody. So as a result, maybe you would think that the person should get lashes, but we say instead that the person pays a monetary fine. So too, you might have thought that this person who violated the girl should get lashes, but no, instead he's going to pay a fine. Okay, so that was Ula's explanation. So again, Ula's explanation is we're talking about here a na'ara, that's why she's fine. We're talking about an older girl for in the Mishnah and Makot, and so that's why she gets lashes. Rabbi Yochanan says no, they could both be talking about a na'ara, and our Mishnah is talking about when there's no warning, and if there's no warning, you just pay a fine. You can't give somebody lashes without a warning. And the Mishnah in Makot involves a warning. And in connection with that, not only do you get lashes, but you get also a fine. However, according to Rabbi Yochanan would still say that in general, we would say kum le b'derabim yunei, that when you have multiple violations, you're only going to get the most severe, but in this particular case, you would get both lashes and a fine. So again, at the end of today, or maybe starting tomorrow, we'll see a third answer. But now the question is that the Gemara wants to know, and this is in the bottom line, the very first word of the bottom line. The Gemara asks, Rabbi Yochanan, my time lo amar ku'ula. Why didn't Rabbi Yochanan agree with Ula? Why not say, isn't that a simpler answer to say that our Mishnah is talking about a na'ara, and the Mishnah over there in Makot is talking about a bogeret? So im kain bidalta ervat ochotcha lo tegaleh, because effectively, if this were true, you would undermine the whole concept of somebody who violated a sister. And the reason is because in general, in that situation, as long as she's a nara, you'd only get one, you'd only pay the monetary penalty. You wouldn't have the penalty that's associated with the ervad achotcha. And so the Gemara asks, I don't understand. There are other situations where we say that there is a potential penalty, but we have a monetary fine and we are okay with that. So the Gemara asks, Chova b'chaveiro nami. So too with when you wound somebody. Im came because of course you pay only monetary damages if you wound somebody. You don't get lashes. Im came bitalta lo yosif pen yosif. Right? You violated the concept that there's a verse that says that you're not allowed to add to the number of lashes, and we learn from that prohibition of the Beit Din adding lashes that of course nobody else could hit somebody else. So and Adam Zomamim Nami, and similarly with respect to false witnesses who testify that somebody did something that they didn't do. Im came betalta bahaya im bin hakot harasha, right? You're undermining this concept that the wicked one is liable to lashes. So Ella Adam Zomim Efshar L'Kayuma Ben Grusha Ben Chalusa. No, the answer is that there is a situation where somebody who is an Eid Zomim, who's a false testifier, will get lashes. If, for example, they try to testify that Joe Cohn is actually not a Kohen. And if they testify to that, that's an amazing picture, Kanan. If they testify to the fact that Joe Cohn was not a Kohen and they're testifying falsely, and they're found to be zomim because two other witnesses come and say you couldn't testify to that because you were with us at the time. So then in that situation, ordinarily we give the people who are Adam Zomim the same penalty. But here we can't do that because the two witnesses, even if the two witnesses were Kohanim, we wouldn't do it because it would undermine the facts, meaning they are not in fact invalid Kohanim. And so as a result, we say that in that situation, you get lashes. So similarly, and so Chova b'chaveiro nami, and similar with respect to hitting somebody, even though ordinarily you only pay monetary damages, you could hit somebody in a way that doesn't cause a shava pruta worth of damage. And if you do that, then you would be subject to lashes. It creates an ironic situation, right? Where if I just do a minor damage to you through hitting, I end up getting subject to lashes. And most people would prefer to pay a small monetary damage over getting lashes. But in any event, that's there. Well, there's the question is does that count, or do you get, or is the first, is it too late? Exactly.
How many lashes?
You would get 39 lashes. That's the general, assuming that you can withstand it.
Full force?
Yes, absolutely, full force. Yeah, this is too much. Well, most people, they would evaluate the person they would evaluate the person as they were getting lashes, but also before they get lashes. So before they got lashes, they would evaluate their strength and determine how many they think that they could get. No, people did. People could survive that. But in any event, the point is that during the course of the lashes, they would also check to make sure that they would be able to continue to bear the lashes. So in any event, but now we can say, but if that's true, right? So with respect to the Adam Zomamim and the and hitting somebody, we found ways that you could end up getting lashes and not have to pay the fine. Well, similarly too, achosonami, we can say, just as Ula did, that where do you get lashes? When the sister is a bogeret, when she's already older, when she's already 12 and a half. And so as a result, our initial objection, the reason that we gave to say that Rabbi Yochanan does not hold like Ula, doesn't work, So we need to give another reason for why Rabbi Yochanan doesn't hold like Ula. And so as a result, so now we are on 1, 2, 3, 6, 7 lines down on Lamed Gimel Lamed Aleph. So Amar Lach Rabbi Yochanan would say, Hi Tachas Asherina. So what it was, again, remember that we said in the introduction, the basis for Ula's learning is that it was Tachas Asherina, that he did a Tachas Ksera Shava, and just like Ayin Tachas Ayin is Kesef, so too Tachas Asherina and is Kesef and not lashes, so too Tachas Asherina is Kesef and not lashes. So when we boile, look at Abaye, but the problem is Rabbi Yochanan needs that word tachas, needs that phrase for a different teaching. And in Judaic thought, in Talmudic thought, often if you have a teaching that is used for one thing, it cannot be used for something else. We need to have an additional word, additional letter. But here we have the Amar Abaye, because Abaye says Amar Kra Tachas Asher Ina, Tachas. So hi Tachas Asher Ina Miklal Deika Bosha Sufagam. So the point is that because the pasuk says that the fine is for the afflicting does not include any kind of humiliation and depreciation, meaning that in addition to paying the fine for having violated the girl, the violator will also have to pay for any humiliation that she endured and for any depreciation in her valuation should she have to sell herself as a slave. So Ula. So in second, what about Ula? Ula certainly holds of this teaching. So Nafgalei Midarava. So he learned this concept out from Rava's statement. The Amar Rava Amar Krav Nasan Ha'ish Hashochev Ima La'avia Na'ara Kamishim Kesef. So the point is that the pasuk says that the man who slept with her, who lay with her, he's the one who needs to give the money, but it didn't need to say that. We already knew from the prior psukim who this was talking about. So the answer is Hanas Shchiva Chamishim. So the fee associated with that lying is the 50 shekel. Miklal, that implies the Ika Bosha Sufagam, but there is other penalties, meaning there are other aspects to the damage that need to be compensated. And so as a result, that is how Ula is able to learn that same lesson. But since Rabbi Yochanan learned this lesson along the lines of what Abaye said, using the words that Abaye said, he didn't have the extra verse to teach the lesson associated with Ula's answer. And so as a result, he had to come up with his own answer to say that the difference between the Mishnah here, which says money, and the Mishnah in Makos, which says lashes, is based on the fact that they're both talking about a Nara, and the question is just whether or not she was warned, whether or not he was warned, excuse me. If he was warned, so then he gets lashes and pays a fine. If he was not warned, he only pays the fine. Okay, so now we said that earlier in connection with Zomimim that were, that they only have to pay money, and they don't need to also get lashes. If two witnesses come and say about somebody falsely that they owed, that John owed Jane $100, and then it turns out that those witnesses are false witnesses, so then those two witnesses will have to pay John $100. They don't get lashes. And so we said that we gave the basis for that. So now we're going to teach other bases for that same teaching. So Rebbe Lazar, Omer, Edom Zomim Mamona Mishalme Umilka Lolaki. That Edom Zomim, they pay the money, but they don't get lashes. Mishum Delav B'nei Hasra Ninu. He makes a suggestion that it's not based on the fact that of any sukkim, but it's based on, which was what we saw before, that it was talking about giving from one hand to another hand. And so what is given from one hand to another hand but money? And so as a result, we said that that refers to money. So mishum delav b'nei hasra nenu, it's because they aren't subject to being warned. So
warned to tell the truth before they testify?
What was that?
Don't they have to swear to tell the truth before they testify?
They do, but
Well,
that's
that
not the
hasra?
same thing as being warned that if you testify falsely, then
Well,
you are going to be subject to the penalty of Eidim Zomimim. And we're going to now go through exactly why that is, that we don't actually give them that warning. So, Amarava Teda Nisri Buhu Amos. So, because Rava makes the comment, this is true, right? Know that you're right, because when are we going to give it? Nisri Buhu Meikara, if we give it to them, sometime before they testify, Amri Ishtalyan, they could say that they forgot. Nisri Bahu B'Shas Maaseh, if we give it to them, give them the warning at that moment, just before they testify. So Parshe Below Masade, then we're going to end up scaring away good witnesses. So Nisri Below Basof, and if you testify, you give it to them at the end. So Maida Haba Haba, they already did it. That they're not going to be able to undo it. So Maskif La Abaye said, 1 second, I don't understand. Do it afterwards, but do it immediately afterwards. So that way will have a chance to effectively undo their statement, because we have a general principle that if you say something and then realize that you got it wrong within what is known as toch kedei dibur, which is the time that it says to say shalom aleichem mori v'rabi, that hello my teacher. So that is enough. You can undo it. And so, for example, if let's say you accidentally in the Amidah say b'tein bracha when you meant to say b'tein talum matar lebracha, you can make that change very quickly and say the other one. So we often will allow one utterance to overcome another utterance within a certain amount of time.
What is the purpose of the hasra'ah?
Is in order to be able to give a penalty. You can only, a hasra is required in order to penalize somebody for doing.
Just a formal requirement, or it's a deterrent?
It's a good question,
because if it's just a formal, if it's a deterrent, then you just give it before and then you remind them. That's what they do with witnesses. Every day we remind you you're under oath.
Yes, 100%. So this, it seems like it is more about the ability to give the penalty than about the prevention of the sin. But I can't definitively prove that. But I think that, and I'm sure you can make arguments in both directions. But I think that, but here it is clear that. Again, we don't want to scare off valid witnesses by telling them, by overemphasizing the downside. After all, in most situations, the witnesses themselves have nothing to gain. So as a result, we don't want to threaten them and result in their being concerned. Well, this is just not worth it worth my involvement.
Yeah, but that's the same with any witness in any case. You're called to testify because you have evidence to give.
Correct.
There's nothing in it for you, but it's part of the justice system that we need people to come forward. So, but they
Correct.
still have to, they still have to testify truthfully.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Everybody knows that.
Yeah, and they're told that they have to testify truthfully, but that's not the same as telling them the punishment that they would be subject to if they testify falsely and they're found to be Eidim Zomimim. So that's the concern with doing it before. But Abaye has now at least offered a potential way around it to get through it, because why not just have him testify immediately afterwards, and that will be sufficient. So, right. Well, the point. Well, let's see. Take a look. So, Maskif lo Rav Acha Brei de Ravika V'nisri behu me'ikara, unumrames behu remuze. Or I guess this is in some ways what Hanan was suggesting. Let's warn them ahead of time, meaning, we don't have to warn them immediately before. So they come in to testify. We give them the warning. By the way, everybody's got it. And then we just hint to them and we say, hey, remember the warning that we gave you previously. And so as a result, it won't be too intimidating. Tosos asked the interesting question. Well, 1 second. If we say that Tokadei Dibor is just the time it says to say, hi to your teacher, well, presumably the warning is going to take up most of that time. So so they're not going to have much time to recant. So the Tosos answers that in fact that as long as you are involved with something, that it's sufficient. And indeed, that's what we say. We deal with this almost every Shabbos when we wash our al natilas yadayim and then come to the table and wait. Often we are involved in the process of getting the bread ready, etc. So even though there's often sometimes a pause between washing al natilas yadayim and making hamotzi, the concept of Tokadei Dibor can apply in that situation. So we often will apply that kind of thinking. All right. So, but in any event, Hadar Amar Abaye. So Abaye said to them, Lav Milsahi da Amr. Actually, on reflection, what I said, made my suggestion of the warning afterwards doesn't really work. Because if I were to tell you that in fact Edim Zomim require Hasra, so we're going to now undermine our entire process. And we're going to emphasize it's not about the fact that the Hasra isn't possible, but rather it's because Hasra is not appropriate. Because if I were to say that I'm supposed to give them a warning, ki lo masrin behu, lo kadlinin behu, and if we don't warn them, we're not going to kill them. So mi'ika mida de inhu bo kato lo hasra. 1 second, can there be such a thing as they're wanting to kill their victim without a warning? The inhu bo hasra, and they need a warning, right? So if these two witnesses come in falsely and try to kill John Doe, so then it if we're going to require witnesses, the warning for them, well then the pasuk says that we have to do to them what they were trying to do to John Doe. Well, what were they trying to do to John Doe? They were trying to kill him, even though John Doe never got any real warning because they're false witnesses. They were with somebody else at the time that they're testifying. So as a result, we can't give a warning, because if we give a warning, then their victim didn't get warned, so they shouldn't get any protections beyond what their victim was receiving. And of course, their victim received no protection. So that is true, except that we have a special pasuk here that specifically says that we have to do to them what they were trying to do to their brother, to the other person. And so as a result, you're absolutely right. In an ordinary case, we have the general Torah concept of the Torah will give a prohibition for something, and the Torah will give a warning for something and the punishment. And so as a result, we know that just as the Torah warned, we have to give a warning to somebody before they take the action in order to be able to punish them. But when it comes to Edom Zomim, we have a special rule that says you should do to him just as he was doing to somebody else.
This is intentional false, not just like a mistake in fact, right?
Yes, you have to, again, the witnesses have to be testifying to something where other witnesses come and say that they were with us at that time.
Yeah, but if they made a mistake and they thought they didn't.
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I don't, hopefully we'll get there, but I have not learned the details, or do not remember well enough the details of Edom Zomim to know whether they have that ability to say, oh my gosh, we made a mistake. We said day one when we meant day two. That's an excellent question that I don't know the answer to.
It sounds like it has to be intentional.
Oh, for sure. There's the understanding is that this was intentional.
Right, and malicious.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the whole point. Exactly.
Not like unintentional and
Correct. So Maskiv lo Rav Sama Bray de Rav Yirmiyah. So now Rav Sama, the son of Rav Yirmiyah, asks the question: Elamayata ben Grusho ben Chalutza delo mika asher zamam kam misrabe. So in second, when it comes to Ben Grusha and Ben Chalutza, what do we do with them? They don't get what happened to them. What they were trying to do. They just get lashes. So how can we give them lashes? Or at least if we do want to give them lashes, liboy hasra, shouldn't we have to give them warning? So Amar Kra mishpat echad yelachem. So we have a general teaching that one law is for everybody. So mishpat hashaveh lekulchem. So this same rule is going to apply to everybody. So that's another explanation. So now we've given a second explanation for how we can understand that Edom Zomimim don't get lashes generally, and indeed, in under this understanding, they're not even getting hasra. Okay, so now on Lama Bet Amabet, so yesterday we said that Kain Yanatain Bo, that the same thing, it needs to be that we learn from Kain Yanatain Bo that that needs to be something that you give, right? So as a result, that was again the basis for the teaching that you need to give money if you give false testimony rather than get lashes. So now we're going to offer another explanation. Rav Shisha Brei de Rav Idi Amar Chovel b'chaveiro. I'm sorry, that was the basis of saying that if somebody not testified falsely, but if somebody hit somebody, they would have to pay money rather than get lashes. So now we're going to offer two different approaches, but actually in the end, neither one of them will be a 100% proof. And so our best explanation for why, if you hit somebody, you pay money is based on Kain Yinatain Bo, that so shall you give to him. And giving and a reference to giving suggests money. So Rav Shisha Brei de Rav Idi Amar Chovel b'chaveru nami mamona mishalim umilka lo malakev mahacha. So Rav Shisha says, here's the basis for saying that a person who hurts somebody ends up having to pay money and not get lashes. Ki yanatsu anashim v'nigfu isha hara v'yatsa yiladeha. If you have two people fighting and they accidentally hit a woman, and she loses her, a pregnant woman, and she miscarries, and we say that in that situation you have to pay a monetary fine. V'amar Rabbi Elazar b'matzut shebemisa hakasav medaber. And here we're talking about a fight to the death, meaning a fight that involving blows that could potentially kill somebody. Because we actually say that if somebody were to actually have died, then you would kill the person who did the killing. So now, Heichidami, what's our case? If in fact the person has not gotten any warning, so amai mikdal, why would he be executed? Elapshita de asrube, so it must be that he did get a warning. So umusra ledavar chamor havi mutsra ledavar kakal, and we say that when somebody gets a warning for a big thing, then they're considered warned for a small thing. So if I warn somebody and say, "Don't kill John Doe," and then instead the person just injures John Doe very badly, so then that is sufficient for them to potentially get lashes. So it must be, so we gave him the warning, and the warning should apply, and yet, v'amar rachmana, v'lo yiyeh ason anoshi anesh. If there's not a death, if there's no death as a result, well, then the punishment that he gets is the punishment that he gets, which we know is money. And so as a result, doesn't that show that somebody who is potentially liable for both lashes and money only pays money if they injure somebody? So the Gemara is now going to object. It's going to offer two objections. The second one is going to be successful. So let's take a look. So Maskif la Rav Ashi objects to this. What's the basis for saying that just because you warn somebody for something that's strict, you warn something for something that's lenient? Dilma lohavi. Maybe it's not the case. Imtim salomer habi. And if you were to even say that in fact it is the case, how do you know that the death penalty is more strict? Dilma malchus chamor. As we turn to Lama Gimel Lama Bet, maybe actually a punishment of lashes is more strict. Da amarav ilam ilmale nagdua lechananya mishal va'azarya palchu letzalma. If not for the fact that if in fact Hananya, Mishael, and Azariah were threatened by Nebuchadnezzar, and they chose to jump into the furnace rather than to worship an idol. And so as a result, but the Gemara says that Rav says that had they, instead of being threatened with death and given the opportunity to jump into the furnace, they were whipped, well, then they would have actually worshiped the idol. So Tosos is like, I don't understand. If you're not supposed to Yarog Val Yavor, so how could this even happen? So Tosos answers that in fact, Rabbeinu Tam suggests that in fact the idol was an idol of Nebuchadnezzar, not intended to glorify himself, and not really intended by anybody to be viewed as a god. And so as a result, it would not actually violate the strict rules of Avodah Zarah. And so as a result, that's the point. There are other obvious ways to understand it. What? Oh, because they were trying to be strict on themselves, and exactly. And so the Rambam, however, disagrees with this. But no, well, yeah, exactly. Not to rely on miracle, they were just trying to be strict with themselves. So the Rambam completely disagrees with this and says, the Rambam says you're not allowed to give your life up if you're not actually obligated to give your life up. And so if it's not one of the big three. So in any event, there are other ways to understand it, including the fact that it doesn't mean maybe they wouldn't have been even given the opportunity. The point is that if they would have been subject to lashes, right, effectively, the point is that torture can be effective at getting somebody to do what you want. Might not get the right information in connection with obtaining information, but if you're just trying to get somebody to do something, well, torture is potentially effective.
It's not a serious argument, is it?
This is not intended? Well, it's interesting. I mean, it does have, this argument does have ramifications. I mean, this is in connection with, for example, euthanasia. This is one of the bases to argue that actually, pain and suffering can be even worse than death. And so as a result, there's a basis.
That's your own life, not somebody else's life.
That's true, 100%. But this is also focusing on their own life, right? The point is that so it's there are ramifications that this is discussed. So anyway, the point is that and indeed some Rishonim actually say that if you are being tortured and then and so it's not kill John Doe or I'll kill you, then you're obligated to give up your life. But if I say kill John Doe or I'm gonna torture you for the next 30 years and do something really disgusting and painful, so then some will actually say that actually torture you are allowed to. You're not that based on this. So there is There are people who actually learn based on this some ramifications. Now, that's not a universal position. Indeed, it's essentially a singleton position in the Rishonim, but it does exist. So it's worthy.
It's not supposed to be torture.
Say again.
Malkot is not supposed to be torture.
Correct.
That very clearly. It's punishment, but it's not torture.
That's exactly right. Okay, so in any event, so that was the question. So and our answer is Amrle Rav Sama Berei the Rav Asi the Rav Ashi the Amri La Rav Sama Berei the Rav Ashi the Rav Ashi. So the different possible people as to whether it was the son of Rav Ashi or the son of Rav Asi. But in any event, the point is the lo shani lach bein hakash yesh la kitzva la kasha ain la kitzva. 1 second, there's a big difference. You can't. So what were they trying to prove from Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah? We were trying to prove that lashes given by court could somehow be worse than death given by court. But the point is that based on the fact that Mishael, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, if they had gotten lashes, maybe they would have worshipped the idol. And the point is that the difference is that the lashes that they would have been threatened with were lashes that would last forever, meaning it wasn't a fixed number. It wasn't just 39. And so whereas here, since we're talking about from the court, we know the number. And so it's only when there's an unlimited amount that it's worse than death. So as a result, therefore, that is not going to be a good question. So now we ask question number 2, and that will be a good question. So Maskif lo Rav Yaakov from Nahar Code. So Rav Yaakov from Nahar Code asked the question, Hanil Rabbanan da Amri Nefesh Mamish. So according to the people who say Nefesh Tachas Nefesh means an actual life, Ela Rebbe da Amar Mamon. Well, 1 second. According to Rebbe, in this case of where the 2 men were fighting, and they accidentally kill the woman, and we say that in fact you don't actually lose your life, but in fact if you intend to kill, according to Rebbe, if you intend to kill person number 1, and instead you swing and you miss the person and you hit person number 2 instead, you don't get the death penalty, according to Rebbe. Rather, you just pay monetary damages. And so then in that situation, my ikal amemar, meaning how can you derive from this case that we're talking about somebody who was warned? Maybe we're not talking about any kind of penalty at all. We're not talking about the death penalty at all. We're talking about just monetary payment, which doesn't require any kind of warning. So Ela Amar Rav Yaakov min Arba Kod Mishmei de Rava mehacha. So as a result, he offers his own interpretation, his own location for this source. So im yakum b'hishalech b'chutz al mishanto v'nikah hamaket. Because what do we say? That if the person gets up and is able to, if you hit somebody and they don't die, but rather they go to the hospital, and then after a few days they get well, then we're going to say the person doesn't have to isn't going to get the death penalty. Rather, they're going to just pay money. Well, would you ever say that somebody's going to be able to walk around in the marketplace and the person who hit him is going to be killed? Of course not. It shows that we put the guy who did the hitting in jail. I mean, we hold him because if he's going to die, so if the person who was hit dies, so then we have to kill the person who did the hitting. Well, then he has to pay all the monetary damages. He needs to pay for the loss of work. He needs to pay for the doctor bills, etc. So heichidami. So what's the case? If we didn't warn him, then how could we kill him? So elapshita to asrbe. So as a result, we have to say that in fact he was warned. Because we warned him for something strict, namely that he would get the death penalty. So then as a result, so he was also warned for something lenient. So as a result, now that this person has gotten up from his potential deathbed, and now we're going to punish this guy who did the hitting, even though the guy could potentially be subject to lashes, what do we tell him that he has to do? Instead, he has to just pay. So the Gemara is now going to object. Again, one of the objections is one that we saw already. And then the second one will be a new objection, and again will be sufficient to at least leave us with the kasha. So as a result, neither of these two additional efforts to try and give another basis for saying that when you hit somebody, you only pay money and you don't get subject to lashes, how that could potentially come from the Torah. So Maskif lo Ravashi. So Ravashi asked, first of all, maybe when you warn for one, for the more strict, it doesn't mean that you're warned for the more lenient. And moreover, and if you say that it's more strict, that you do get a warning, how do you know that Misa is the one that's more chamor? Dilma Malkus chamor. Maybe lashes is more strict. Amar Rav ilmali nugdua l'chananya v'yishal v'azarya palchul etalma. Again, if they had whipped them, then they would have worshipped the statue. So Amar le Rav Sama Brei de Ravasi l'Ravasi v'Amri la Rav Sama Brei de Ravashi l'Ravashi. So below Shani Lach Ben Haka sheyesh la kitzva la kasha ein kitzva. Again, we see that there's a big difference between a beating that has a limit, namely the lashes that are given by court, and the lashes that would have been given to Chananya, Mishael, and Azariah. That's a big difference. That's torture. So as a result, therefore, that's going to be a key element. So as a result, we are still okay with our teaching. But then Maskif lo Rav Mari then objects. So 1 second, how do you know that we're talking about somebody who is intentionally trying to do somebody, intentionally trying to kill somebody, and that when we're talking about the nikah, that the person is not going to be penalized, that we're talking about they're not going to be penalized miktala, from death. Dilma b'shogeg b'nika megalus. Maybe we're not talking about anybody who got warned at all, and we're talking about somebody who hit somebody accidentally, and therefore their punishment was not going to be death, but it was going to be that they go to Galut, they go to one of the cities of refuge. So Kasha, in fact, it's difficult. It's not a perfect answer. So therefore, the best explanation for why we would say one and not the other, why we say that you get a financial penalty and not lashes, is based on Kain Yinatain Bo. So the fact that we have the same concept, that the word Yinatain is used for money, so that's the basis. Now we get the third and final answer.
Hasra'ah has to mention the crime that would be committed, not just the act, the underlying act. Like,
correct. You mentioned
don't hit him. You have to say, if you hit him, that could be murder, and the penalty for murder is X or whatever.
That's right. If you hit him with a blow that was intended to kill, and you kill him, then that would be murder, and you would need to and the penalty for that is the death penalty, the hand of court.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So now we're going to give, again, we go back to our original question where we had Ula and Rabbi Yochanan offering answers. Again, we have this conflict between the Mishnah in Makot and our Mishnah, where our Mishnah says money. The Mishnah in Makot said lashes, and Rish Lakish Amar money. Who is the author of our Mishnah? Rabbi Meir he Amar Loka Umishalem. That when our Mishnah, it does not mean that you pay and you and you don't get lashes. You pay. Our Mishnah is only talking about the paying, but you would also get lashes. So Rabbi Meir Afilu Bitonami. Well, 1 second, we're going to see in our next Mishnah that if one were to violate their daughter, then they would not actually pay the fine. So, because based on the concept of a kumle b'derabamine, because you are subject to a more severe penalty. Rabbi Meir Loka u'mishalem islay Mesu Mishalim Lasley. And if you want to say, 1 second, maybe Rebbe Meir holds that you receive lashes and you pay, but you're not going to get put to death and pay below. But that's not the case. Vahatanya, Gana V'Tavach B'Shabbos. If you stole a sheep and slaughtered it on Shabbos, Gana V'Tavach La'avodas Kochavim. If you stole a sheep and you slaughtered it for idol worship, Ganav Shor Haniskal Utvacho. Or you stole an ox that was condemned to be stoned because it had killed somebody and you slaughtered it. Mishalim tashlumi arba v'chamisha. Then you pay 4 and 5 times. Divrei Rebbe Meir, the Chachamim Potrin, and the Chachamim say that you're exempt. Why are you exempt according to the Chachamim? Because of the process of Kum Levi D'Rabba. You only get the death penalty for violating Shabbos, for doing Avodah Zarah. And so what? So the last one. Yes, you may. Yes, that there you I think that the answer in that one is not based on Kum Levi D'Rabba Mine, but rather you haven't done anything. So so we're gonna have to explain why, according to Rebbe Meir, you are obligated at anything, but we're gonna give a special circumstance and thereby answer that question. So okay, so now the Gemara is going to answer and explain this in 2 different ways. We're going to say either that actually maybe Rebbe Meir we're talking about an agent. That's going to be Rabbi Yochanan's answer, and then we're going to say Rab is going to answer that we got a special rule for a kanas. Okay, so those are the 2, and that really we don't do both. That in fact, if there's plain monetary damages, we're not going to subject a person. But when we've got a special kanas, then a kanas plus another penalty, that would take effect. So those are the 2 potential answers. So ha in Marallah. So 1 second, it was with respect to the Brisa, Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Amri La, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Rabbi Avin, Rabbi Ilah, V'chol Chavurta, Mishmei, the Rabbi Yochanan Amri. So again, all of this is being said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. We're talking about where you slaughter it through somebody else. 1 second. So how could this person stole it, and the other person, actually this person stole it, and then this person is the one who slaughtered it. How could the person who slaughtered it end up making the one who stole it chayev for the penalty? After all, we have a principle in general of ein shliach ledvar aveira. So how could that be? So we're going to give 3 answers to it. So Amarava, Amarachmana, Utvacho, Omacharo. If you sell it or slaughter it, Ma machira al yedei acher. Just as you sell something, you can sell something through somebody else. Meaning you need another person to participate, namely the buyer. So so too, if you slaughter through somebody else, you'll also be subject to the penalty. And so that was answer number 1. Answer number 2, Zvei Rabbi Yishmael Tana, the part of me of Rabbi Yishmael taught, l'rabos es hashliach, meaning it doesn't just say utvacho o machro. It could have said utvacho umachro. Sometimes the word and in the Torah could be or. So as a result, given the fact that it said specifically the word or, so that comes to teach us that even an agent. So that's answer number 2. And answer number 3, the Bei Chizkiya Tana Tachas Larabos Es Hashliach. So the fact that we say Tachas, that we're going to have to give, and we don't just say that, because again, the pasuk is Ki Yignov Ishor Oseh Utvacho Omacharo Chamisha Bakar Yishalem Tachas Hashor Barbat Son Tachas Haseh. We didn't need to have both tachases. We could have just said 1. And the fact that we have this extra word, so then that tells us that it's also through an agent that you'll also have to pay. So now we've explained why it is that maybe we could say that Rebbe Meir does not, in fact, hold that if you're subject to the death penalty, you're subject to payment of both penalties. Maybe he would only say that you're subject to the payment, and the reason is because here he's not subject to the death penalty because somebody else did the act. Somebody else did the slaughtering for the idol. Somebody else did the slaughtering on Shabbos. And so as a result, therefore, we don't have to, we can explain that when it comes to the next Mishnah that says that if one violated their daughter, Rabbi Meir would say, Kum le b'derabba minei, if the penalty was death. So as a result, we can explain our Mishnah allows both lashes and the fine, whereas the next Mishnah, when it talks about the death penalty, so then you would not get the death penalty and the fine because Rabbi Meir would apply kum le b'derabba minei in that case. So now we still have a lot to talk about this, but we're going to pause here and we will pick up, God willing, tomorrow from this location.
What does this mean? Ein shaliach ledavar avera.
Ein shaliach ledavar avera is the basic concept that if I send you on a mission, if I ask you to worship an idol on my behalf, I ask you to violate Shabbos, to drive to the store to pick something up for me on Shabbos. All of those, if you go ahead and do it, so then the sin is yours and there's no, I may have violated some other things like Lifnei Iver or Misayeya, but I am not going to have violated the underlying prohibition that you have violated.
So if I hire you, to kill somebody else, and you do that, I'm not liable for anything? That's
right. You are not liable for the killing. That is correct. You might be liable for other things, but you are not liable for the killing because we say Ein shliach ledvar avera.
Only the hitman, not the
only the hit. That's exactly right.
The boss.
That's right. It depends, of course. If there's the interesting question is, do we say this only for a Jew? Lots of interesting questions that get raised by this. So one interesting question that's discussed is, and I don't know the answers to all these questions. I wish I had a better memory. So the one interesting question that's discussed is what happens if the messenger is not Jewish, if the agent is not Jewish. Do we then say that because, of course, or do we say this is only because in general we don't have the concept of any kind of agency for a non-Jew on behalf of a Jew? So that's one. Another interesting question is what happens if the thing that you asked me to do is only prohibited for you and not prohibited for me? So let's say you're a Kohen and you tell me to go marry a Grusha on your behalf. So Ein shliach ledvar avera, well, what does that mean? I didn't do anything wrong. I could have married this girl, but this woman. So that's another interesting case. All these kinds of cases come up, and you're absolutely right. What is the punishment that is associated with the person who hires the hitman? So presumably they did something wrong. So that all that gets discussed.
Yeah, okay, that makes no sense because, the person wouldn't have done it, but for the being ordered to do it or being encouraged to do it by somebody else.
Right, that's true. But at the same time, we ask every person to recognize, who's the boss, right? In connection with Kibbut Av V'Aim, right? We have the Kibbut Av V'Aim is next to the keeping of Shabbos because the idea is that if your parents ask you to violate Shabbos, who are you supposed to listen to more, Hashem or your parents? And so as a result, that same concept applies across the board. So it is a good question. So, all right.
It wouldn't apply for like an animal, like using an animal to
So actually, very interesting question. Using an animal is generally considered some kind of grama, and you are not chayav. So if in fact you affirmatively take a snake and you chomp and you know, open the snake's mouth and you chomp and you, you know, put the poison into somebody, so then you will be treated as if you murdered the person.
But if I
But
have
if
like
you,
a attack dog or something, you know,
but
and
if you, but if you send an attack dog after somebody where it's not a direct, you're affirmatively doing the action on, you know, with the animal's affected parts, then that is considered a grumma. So throwing people to the lions is discussed in the Rambam, and that is not considered direct murder. And as a result, you are subject to the violating of the prohibition of shfichut damim, but you're not subject to the prohibition of ritzicha, of murder. So you would get lashes, but not death penalty. Yeah, not easy. You know, death penalty is hard to give. You know, that's we were going to see in Sanhedrin that any court that gives a death penalty even once in 70 years. So go to your back on mute.
that's different because that's the court. This is like a way for bad people to do bad things and get out of it.
Yeah. So the answer to that is that the courts are empowered. See you later, Mark. The courts are empowered to take actions. So, for example, you know, I don't remember whether we just saw it or we will see it. That you know, when there's nothing to be done, so the court will feed effectively cause the person to have their stomach explode by feeding them, you know, certain grains and then giving them water in order to effectively indirectly kill the person. So, you know, there are mechanisms for the court to sort of imprison and even take further steps in order to dissuade.
Yeah, that's like non-judicial. That's kind of like I mean extrajudicial or something. But okay.
Oh, 100%, absolutely.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Be well. Have a good day.